Hello everyone and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by writer Ewan Morrison to talk about his latest novel For Emma, which is published by Leamington Books. Hello Ewan.
Hello Alistair, how are you?
I'm really well, it's good to see you.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I was thinking that you did one of the very first podcasts that we did many years ago, so it's good to have you back on.
Aye, indeed, we're still here, that's good.
So before we get into the details, can you give listeners an overview of For Emma?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this today because I was thinking about Robert Louis Stevenson. How would Robert Louis Stevenson describe the story? And he would say it's a story of a man haunted by the voice of his dead daughter, and the voice tells him to kill the man who killed her. I think that's really quite simply what it is as a narrative form, you know, but it's framed in the near future. So we have her death. Emma's death happens because she has a brain chip implant. She's working in Silicon Valley and she volunteers to be one of these people who's fitted with a brain chip, a bit like the Neuralink chips that Elon Musk is installing in people just now. So we're never quite sure whether her voice is a ghost or it's a hallucination or whether it's something to do with the technology. But it's really the 30 days in the life of her father who, from hearing the voice in his head, decides that he has to create a bomb to blow up the CEO of the biotech corporation that was responsible for killing his daughter.
So the Robert Louis Stevenson's an interesting comparison because you've got this thing, is it supernatural or is it scientific? Is that going on? Yeah, no, for sure. There's that. I mean, it actually came from an experience I had after my dad died. I was one of these people who had, I think up to about 18% of people have hallucinations of the dead after they lose someone. Mostly audio hallucinations. You think you've just heard them say something. Sure. With me, it was, I just woke up and I thought, oh my God, he's sitting there on the end of my bed. And I've never been one to be taken in by, ghosts and the supernatural and stuff. But I did like the idea of a dead character who's kind of correcting and leading a living person who's fallen apart. And I thought, a father loses his daughter. His daughter's a bit sassy, so he hears her voice and she's telling him, why are you drinking so much? Get up, have a shave, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And that's really where the story just came from, the idea of this energetic voice of a daughter who's trying to help her father through the mourning, but at the same time she's leading him towards an act of vengeance. I mean, the term ghost in the machine is very much overly used, but in this time she really is almost the ghost in the machine. Oh, for sure. And it bleeds into sort of cyberpunk genre as well, or rather, I was always obsessed with J.G. Ballard when I was young, and his notion of myths of the near future. So I really like that as I think probably for the last couple of novels I've been edging my way into sort of soft sci-fi, and the idea, I think it's an idea in Silicon Valley that goes all the way to the top of Silicon Valley just now. They believe in the singularity, which is going to be the moment at which AI goes exponential and achieves self-realization and surpasses all human knowledge, and that's a ghost in the machine as well. Yeah. That's a digital god, a man-made digital god. So I guess we have all that in the book as well. It's hard to talk about it without giving too much away. No, absolutely. But there's lots to go into. And I was thinking, you've got two quotes at the beginning, and often the quotes at the beginning of books, you think, well, they don't serve that much purpose. But in this case, I think it really does split the book into the two themes that you want to explore. Yes. So there's the first one, which is a Dostoevsky quote. Let's just read it out. Actually, you can read it out. Okay. So as you say, the first one is, if I can find it. First one is from Dostoevsky. The death of a child is the greatest reason of all to doubt the existence of God. So powerful. Absolutely. And then from Mo Godit, former Google executive, with artificial intelligence, we are creating God. And that's the span of 150 years, really. From the death of God, which started off with Dostoevsky through to Nietzsche,
into this notion of Silicon Valley inventing a new one. And really the family that's in the story, they're kind of caught at the tail end of the death of God, if you like. So the father, Josh, he's accused by Emma when she's alive of being a nihilist. He's got no values, he doesn't believe in anything. He's a terrible father because he doesn't know, when she's bullied, he doesn't know whether to tell her to turn the other cheek because that would be too Christian, or to stand up for herself because that would be too Darwinian, or whether to tell the school because that would be supporting the state. So he just doesn't know what to do. And that's just a classic example of how throughout the book he just fails to act and fails to protect her as well, and fails to make the right choices in being her dad. So he's the kind of tail end of the nihilism in a sense, and she's the next generation. She would be what would be Generation Z now, and she's really got a big quest for meaning and purpose, and that's how she gets sucked into Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is saying, we're beyond nihilism and the death of God. We're making a new God. Come to us and we'll help you find all the answers to life's problems. In fact, we'll even solve them all. We'll solve depression, we'll solve aging and disease by, brain chips and the singularity and nanobots. We'll create a new transhuman way of being. And that is seductive to Emma because she's been raised without values and without answers. I mean, just from an early age on, it's a thing I've been playing about with for a few books now. It's this idea of the why child, the child that always asks why, but the parents can't give any answers. And it's a little game that she plays with her dad.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I think most parents have experienced this. Your kid's supposed to go to bed and you say, come on, time to go to sleep. And they go, why? And you go, well, we've all got to sleep because we've got to get up and work tomorrow. And the kid goes, why? And then, you're caught in a long chain of whys. Why have we got to eat? Why have we got to be alive? And he always finds himself, her father, unable to answer her whys, and
because she keeps it going long past other kids might.
Oh, indeed. She always invariably ends up on the question of why are there human beings on Earth and why does the universe exist, and just it freaks out her mother that she always ends up in these dark places with her questions.
But Josh's inaction is interesting because it's all and the idea that we killed God. You remember Nietzsche and in particular, and then if we kill him, then do we have to create another one to take the place? And that's kind of what you're suggesting. And the reason that Josh is inactive because he isn't being told this is the way you should act. So he's kind of in the kind of Sartrean bad faith. He's kind of stuck without things to he's got free will, but he doesn't quite know how to use that free will, or he's scared to use that free will.
Oh, he's most of his life he's just been coasting and just been reactive to things and not actually taking a lead on things. And as a parent, that's just not enough. You have to be able to know what you stand for. So, I mean, ultimately, after Emma's died, and it's all hushed up by the medical establishment, by Silicon Valley, and even later on by the government, we find he's really crushed by the fact that his inactivity might have brought all this about, but at the same time it spurs him, or Emma's voice does, the voice in his head does spur him to actually take action for the first time in his life, and he's liberated by that in these 30 days when he knows or thinks he's going to die. He's going to blow himself up in a suicide murder act of vengeance at the end of the 30 days. And there's moments in those 30 days where he's just things around him seem more alive. Interactions with people are much more fueled with energy. He has this little hilarious encounters with people that are like serving him in in the hardware store, for example, when he's when he's trying to buy the bits and bobs for his pipe bombs,
and it's the wrong size. I love that. It's so funny. But he's like, no, if you use that pipe, your water won't go to the right place, or it'll do this. And
and he's like, why didn't I do more research? What kind of pipes do I need? Do I need metal pipes or aluminium pipes or plastic pipes? And the guy's just running rings around him. And then And then he's trying to get some gasoline later on because it's set near San Francisco, and he's just been served by this girl, and he thinks, I've been served by her for years and years and years and years, and she is miserable and she's depressed and she barely looks up. She always just chews her gum. I'm going to give her a surprise. And so after, when he's paying, he just says to her, do you know, I'm going to be dead in 30 days time. I'm going to blow myself up. And she stares at him and he thinks for a second, oh, a flash of recognition. And then she goes back to chewing her gum and she says, do you want a receipt? So there's these little sparks of hope for him in those 30 days, I think.
That idea, if he feels more alive, and even with getting pain as he eventually does, that even that, dealing with that makes him feel more alive, makes him feel alive.
Oh yeah, because he's going through massive blood poisoning from all of these chemicals that he's been amateurishly building a bomb with, because the bomb has to, of course, get bigger as events transpire. And
you should say this: none of this is a spoiler. I think on the first page you make reference to the San Francisco bomber.
That's it. Yep. We know that a bomb's going to go off from the first page, and the question really is how, not so much why. It's like, how does it get to this stage that this actually happens? Because you're about 200 pages in, and it looks like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So the structure is a really interesting one, because it's almost like a discovered manuscript type of thing, in that you've got your editor, works at a publishing company, gets this. Now the email has got a link to the video, is that how it is? And she thinks it's spam.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she worries about opening it, and it's not even addressed to her. It's where the title of the book comes from. So the folder just says "For Emma," and that kind of gets her. She's kind of bored of her job as well. So that's one of the reasons that she actually thinks, hold on, well, if this is connected to the San Francisco bomber, what if it's an actual scoop? What if it's information about him, etc.? And she opens it and it turns out it's actually video recordings made by the guy himself. And she's very skeptical, dubious about that. But gradually she gets pulled into it, and starts transcribing it, steals the actual video recording, gets it off her work laptop, and brings it home and continues transcribing it there. Then she starts to get paranoid about the fact that maybe she's being mapped or followed by the authorities as well, because it might be an illegal document, and so on. So she gets thoroughly involved in it. I'd probably say she's probably about a tenth of the actual story.
Yeah, it keeps coming back to her as she discovers more, or she takes action herself to kind of go through.
Yeah, and she has to sort of verify who he is as well. And this is a gradual sense that she's going through it that she's in possession of something that is dangerous and that might be dangerous to herself. And she goes through process of like redacting out information that could be dangerous for the reader to read as well. So there's this process of erasure that starts to pick up through the book as well.
So that's interesting, the redacted sections. I was wondering that's who knows what's behind them, but you feel like it's names of people or places or events or things like that, and it does give the book a kind of more immediacy, because you think, well, this could be something I shouldn't be reading. And there's also Emma's videos as well. She's using her phone, I think, sends videos to there, so you've got different. The story's being told through kind of different layers. Yeah,
different formats.
Yeah.
I really love the stuff that Emma films herself, because she's secretly filming, just to keep a record in case things go wrong, what the experiments are with the injections of nanobots into people and the installation of brain chips. It starts off with apes, and then it works its way up into humans. And it's all very dubious, because some of it's going on in the third world as well. And she's documenting this evidence. And there's just a sense that well, as we're reading the book, it's like she's documenting it, but we got a sense of dread that she's getting pulled deeper into herself. So the people or the animals that are being damaged by this technology, it could start to happen to her as well, especially as she's kind of enticed by the maverick who runs the...
It's that why again. She wants to know what might happen if this, follows on as it's going. She's willing to be at the forefront of it.
Indeed, and there's, without giving too much away, there's a big decision that she's that she makes when she's asked by the head of the corporation, a guy called Naumann, if she'll be one of the first deep human implants. And she thinks about how the implantation could actually cure diseases, cure depression, how ultimately it could help herself and her father as well. So it goes back to him again.
And there, for me anyway, the kind of real sci-fi, or maybe soon to be real, but that's the real science fiction moments, isn't it? When you're going through what she's seeing, what she's experiencing, and what the possibilities of that are.
Some of the stuff which is footage that she finds of the experiments in the third world. I mean, this is horrific stuff. Of experiments that have gone wrong, and bodies that have been eaten by the nanobots, etc. And we're into real sci-fi horror there. But really, what I was just trying to do was take all of the great and grandiose claims that were made by tech gurus like Ray Kurzweil. In his book, The Singularity is Near, he talks about injecting bodies full of nanobots, which will mend human tissue and deliver drugs to specific areas and increase dopamine in your head if you're depressed, or thin your blood for you. And it's a sort of utopian science ideal that he has, and that people still get investment, of billions into doing research on these things. It's not quite materialized yet, but it's a potential future technology that might emerge. And so my question was just, it's going to require so much testing, and there's going to be fatalities. There'll be animal fatalities. I mean, if you look at Elon Musk already, to do the Neuralink brain implants, according to 2 different sources, there's been between 1,000 animals have died in those experiments, and 4,500. This is dogs, rabbits, 2 different kinds of monkeys. And just looking over the history of testing on humans in the third world over the last 30-40 years, it's been horrific how big pharma has been doing these experiments in India on people and not telling them what they're actually injected with. So in a sense, I was fusing some sci-fi, just bringing around the tech gurus' dreams of these nanobots, and just putting it into a process where it was like, well, how would they do this? They would do it in different countries where there was less protection for people, and then just writing up what came from that.
You mentioned a transhumanist, so for listeners, because it wasn't a term, transhumanism, that I knew that well. Can you maybe explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's an idea that's been developing from the 1990s, and there's a bunch of very well funded gurus, one of them being Ray Kurzweil, another one being a British philosopher called David Pearce, another one called Nick Bostrom, another one called Max Tegmark. All of their ideas are about the idea that technology will surpass human knowledge soon, and that we will have to merge with the machines one way or another, whether that's to do with implants, or whether that's to do with ingesting the machines, or uploading ourselves into the machines as well. So they have multiple ideas of how this merger takes place, but they consistently believe that it'll be the next leap in human evolution. So we will go from being humans to being transhumans, which is the intermediary space before we reach post-human.
Right.
And so a transhuman would be something like a cyborg, and a post-human...
I was thinking of the Borg in Star Trek.
Exactly. The Borg in Star Trek are absolutely transhumans. In fact, Nick Bostrom, one of the main transhumanists, said, well, yes, we're working towards something like the Borg, but we'll make them nice. And I just thought, I don't know about that. Because, so these scientists and theorists, they actually do talk about how they want us to be able to communicate our feelings and ideas over great distances through brain chips that are inserted. So we could both be chipped, and I could feel what you're feeling at this moment in my body, etc. And these are crazy science ideas that have got huge sway in Silicon Valley, which, as we know, is just funded to an extraordinary degree with speculative capital. So, so that's transhumanism, and the idea if you come up against people who are defenders of transhumanism, you say, no, this is a bad idea. They'll call you a doomer.
Right.
Because what you're doing by negging their belief system is you're stopping the evolution of the science. And so therefore you're dooming humankind to just be stuck in our horrible bodies forever. And part of the Elon Musk idea as well is that we have to escape this planet because it's going to get burned up by the sun in 1 billion years. That's a very transhumanist idea. So we're going to become cyborgs and we're going to become immortal living in machines so that we can escape the sun. It seems like a sci-fi idea, but people are pouring billions of money into investing in these things.
And that's why certain people are not worried about fossil fuels or anything like that, because we'll soon be off the be on Mars or beyond.
Good luck to them.
And you mentioned that it's kind of set in a near future. I was thinking quite a lot of your novels are either set in a kind of near future or a slightly different future, as well. Is that important that you deal with these things through fiction rather than writing essays on it or your own thoughts on it?
I think I did pick up this near future thing from J.G. Ballard, definitely, and I've always loved the idea of just taking all the things that we can see in the present and just jumping forward a wee bit. I've done quite a few future prediction articles over the years. There was one I wrote for The Guardian where I was a time traveller, went to 2043 and reported back on the state of the publishing industry. It was a satire, there'd be machine written books. There would be a time in which all information would be scrambled, a bit like in the Blade Runner story, the historical record gets scrambled, so we no longer know who the authors were and who the characters were. So we start to think that J.K. Rowling was an actual fictional character because the historical record's been messed up. So that was fun. I liked thinking about those things in the near future, and I guess it gives you a wee bit of freedom to look at trends that are happening now and just to see where they might go in future. It just, for me, it makes writing just a little bit more exciting. That it's that little lift-off moment, Imagine you're stuck on the ground, you're flapping your wee handies, and then suddenly you're just an inch off the ground. You're like, oh, right, that's it, we've got lift-off. It just feels a bit like that when I go from writing about the present to then just slightly in the future.
So when you are faced with the blank page off the new novel, do you have the ideas that you want to write about, or is it different every time?
I think it becomes increasingly, so this is book number 9 now, it becomes increasingly subjective and hard to pin down. And this one really started like a kind of haunting. It was just the idea of a voice that visits a father. So it's a child that visits a father through her voice. And it came in lots of different forms that partly I was thinking it would be quite funny to start with. I didn't really realise how incredibly sad it would also be as well, It's one of the first things I wrote in the book was the scene at Emma's funeral where her father he's been just on a bender for 3 or 4 days, and she just her voice manages to get him dressed, get him shaved, get him there in time, get him parked, get some beta blockers down him, and to walk and talk him with a voice in her head through the ceremony. And originally I just thought that would be really funny to have a voice going, Dad, don't look at me over there in the coffin, I'm in your head now. You don't have to worry about that thing in there, it's rotten now. And then her getting distracted, going like, what is that woman wearing over there? She's wearing fishnets at my funeral. So it's just sort of spiraled from there really, and I just loved that. I like the idea of the voice being a sort of broken voice as well, so it appears sometimes. It's not like a consistent thing at all.
He fears losing it at times, doesn't it?
Exactly. He thinks that she's gone and she won't come back, and was it something that he'd done, or was he just hallucinating it to start with? So this one, more than any of the other novels, it was definitely, I was just seduced by this idea and of this voice, and in fact it was called The Voice to start with. And I think that gave me license to just carry around a notebook and just write the first things that came into my head, and then see where it would land later on. I mean,
because we've spoken a bit about the kind of science aspect of the AI and all these things that you wanted to look into, but its real strength for me is it's about grief.
Yes.
And the terrible grief that Josh is going through, it's really palpable. You could feel it and feel for him. And yes, as you say, there are moments that are slightly absurd, but that whole section actually reminded me of, someone who's so deeply depressed that it's just getting through the next stage. Yeah. That you put on one sock at a time.
That's
it. And managing just about to get there, and it's the voice that gets them through that.
That's it, exactly. I mean, she's saying, that's it, get your toothbrush, put it under the tap, get your toothpaste, come on, squeeze it out. I know you haven't bought toothpaste in a while, but there's some in there. She's just getting him motivated, and in a sense it's the hallucinated voice of his own depression, just trying to get him through. And you can't tell whether it's a ghost, a technological voice, or whether it is just him imagining what he needs to hear, to get things done, to survive. She just sort of tease him and provoke him and get him to do things sometimes. And I think that there is that internal voice that we have. You could call it a conscience, if you like. And it's sometimes, it's against us. And other times it's consoling as well. So I just wanted to try to capture that.
And so Josh is propelled into action and has to research, discover how to make bombs and how to, carry out what he ultimately wants to do. And it kind of highlights how anyone can get this information. It's just all out there, which is it's not slightly terrifying, it is terrifying.
It's extraordinary. Yeah, no, in fact, so the information that is in the book is redacted partially, so that it's got one missing ingredient that is taken out again and again and again. But when I was doing it myself, I was when I was doing the research myself, not making the bombs myself, I was horrified to find, there it is, there's the Anarchist Handbook, and here you are on page 235 is how to make pipe bombs, and then there's guerrilla handbooks. There's all kinds of stuff you can find online still. I don't know how much longer they'll be there for, but that was the big surprise, and the surprise for Josh as well is just how easy it is, in a sense.
And he does have doubts. I mean, there are questions.
No, he has to test everything.
Yeah.
I mean, he does think at some point this is just not going to work, and then he's fumbling his way through it. So at a certain point he's cutting off hundreds of match heads to stuff into a metal tube. Don't want to give your listeners ideas here. And then he's got a toy car, which is a remote control car, because he's trying to make a remote switch detonator, and he's just got no idea if this is going to work. And he has a wee accident as well. He has a few wee accidents.
I don't think anyone will read this book and think, oh, well, that's something I want to follow. But I mean, there's lots of kind of moral questions involved about the individual responsibility, but also the collective responsibility too of big, in this case, Silicon Valley companies and what their responsibility is as well. So it's interesting to compare the two. It's one individual and one huge global even.
For sure. I mean, it's the thing that's been concerning me for a while is what do the little useless people do? What do the people who are just trod on by the big corporations? When we're really pushed to the edge and we really lose something, we lose someone because of an experiment, we lose someone because of a drug, we lose someone because of an accident in a factory, or an accident, a chemical accident or something. You come across these stories of people who either go mad because they just can't fight back against the big machine, the big corporations, or they try to do something themselves. They try to fight back as an individual. So you get the lone stalker of CEO, who shoots them in the back, or you get, the little man, the Unabomber, interestingly enough, who made random attacks on things that he thought were connected with technology, because he felt so powerless, because he himself had been, subject to experiments that the CIA conducted on students when he was in Harvard, and he was completely traumatized by that. But I mean, it's a big issue. It's like, what do What do we little people do now that we feel so disempowered? And I think after COVID, many of us are feeling like that. So I wanted to get inside his head and then question the right and wrong of what he was doing, through that sense that maybe what he's doing is justified, but there are limits that he then goes beyond, or might go beyond, or feels himself approaching, like the question of, is he going to kill one person, or is he going to kill more than one person, and how far is he willing to go to see that through?
Yeah, because he visits a certain place, and then all these questions come on. And also I'm thinking about the role of the editor there. When the editor comes back in, these are the questions that she's faced with as well, looking back on it. And it's interesting, sometimes you have to remind yourself, this event has happened.
Yes.
She, and that, it's good when she comes in to remind you of that. You go, this is someone transcribing videos about something which has happened.
Well, she's kind of like us in that respect, and some of her moral ambivalence about it thing as she gets drawn in deeper. I mean, it's like that thing when you're reading something that a bad person has done or said. It's like, are you a bad person for reading it? Is she a bad person for transcribing it? She's not complicit in what's happened, but is she perpetrating interest in what this person's done? And will she be held accountable for it?
But Josh's reasons, again, it's more revenge rather than impotence in that sense, although he does feel impotence about what he can do, and this is the extreme version of that. But it's incredibly personal. Was it important that this was such a personal reason for doing this?
Well, I think it became more and more personal as I was going through the writing of the book, because I actually started really feeling for him. So there's an interesting thing where he's a sentimental man, and a sentimental man who missed many opportunities to actually be a good dad and be there for his daughter. He's screwed up so many times, and he does sort of try to fill in the gaps by trying too hard sometimes to be a father to her. These terrible puns that they make together, as a way to sort of try to laugh things off all the time. So he's,
I was going to say, the questions that he has, I guess many people do. Did I do the right thing? Here's this incredibly bright daughter he has. Yeah. But by almost pushing her, because at one point she's got an alternative future that she has, pushing her in one way, does that mean he is partly responsible for what happens subsequently?
Well, I mean, that's the dilemma he faces, because the more he gets on with the planning on building of the bombs, the more he pieces together his complicity in the choices that she made in her life, and he could have at a certain point influenced her in a different way, or just let her do what she was going to do, and then she would never have died in the first place.
And again, that's often something that comes with grief, is those questions. Exactly. What could I have done differently, if at all?
I mean, it was painful to write, Josh, because I did come to feel for him immensely. Yeah. And I thought that in a sense that was the only way I could balance a story about a guy who ends up being a bomber and the bomb kills people. It was to have my own feelings about him be contrary to that, you know. So, oh dear, I like him, I love him, I sympathise for him, but he's done a terrible thing. And so I think it's just all about keeping that tension going. And also, you know, maybe that's part of what novels do, is they try to get us to care for people who are transgressors and who do terrible things. I mean, certainly that was part of what Dostoevsky was doing throughout his books. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
Crime and Punishment. We actually care for Raskolnikov at the end of the day, even though he's committed a horrendous act.
And there's a real sense of paranoia for Emma. You know, almost every character that you come across has got that. And do you think that's an absolutely understandable response to the world?
It's probably just me.
I don't think it's just you.
No. Well, I think the world has become an incredibly paranoid place since we've lost access to some tangible sense of what the truth is. You know, the whole fake news thing, the multiplication of news outlets, our distrust of big pharma, of big tech, of big government, of the news. I mean, I think everyone is a lot more jittery than we were 5 years ago. And people are really suffering, from extra anxiety as well. When you look at the number of Generation Z kids who are on beta blockers, I mean, that's just an immediate calmative for anxiety, and it's usually given to people with midlife crisis, but it's now been given to kids just to deal with their anxiety levels. So I do think we're living in a very, very anxious time, and I think it's because we've lost a simple explanation as to how the world works, and there's so much conflict over things like the truth.
And going back to what you said right at the beginning about creating a God, the singularity, as you said, perhaps for some people they're looking for a God who will then tell, this is the truth, this is the new 10 Commandments or whatever it may be.
Well, I mean, that's I always try to learn something from posing a question at the start of a book. So I think I started the book asking, what do people who believe in nothing really need? Mm-hmm. What do they want? And it turns out that both Josh and Emma, his daughter, are both craving a great transcendent answer. For her, it's the transhumanist God, it's the digital deity who will provide the answer to everything. For him, it's to die for a purpose because he couldn't find one to live for. So, I mean, I think looking at society more largely, I think we've been dancing around the edges of the God-shaped hole that we've had since probably the 1850s and 1860s, and we've tried to fill it with different political projects. But I think there is a huge craving for a big transcendent meaning that we can grasp onto, because consumerism is not going to fill the hole, hedonism is not going to fill the hole, personal ambition even is not really quite big enough. So I do think that there is a huge craving for a bigger meaning that we're living with just now, and it can be dangerous, of course, as well, because we could latch onto a belief system that's really very destructive.
Well, it's the downside of nearly all belief systems, isn't it? That somewhere along the line someone's going to use it for ill-gotten gain or worse.
No, for sure. I mean, you see that with what's the first transhumanist cult, these Zhejians in America. So it's 6 kids who are involved in this in Silicon Valley, who went on a murdering spree over 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's like the new Manson family basically, but they had a big transcendent vision of the technological future. So that's a small version of. At the same time, you've got the quest for the digital God that's running through politics just now. You even hear politicians talking about how Elon Musk is going to save the planet or the universe or humanity if we just deregulate all the markets.
Which, these things never seem to quite join to me. Where's the kind of coherent mix? When you started for Emma, did you know how it was going to end? Do you have? And I guess that reflects on all your novels. Do you know when you begin where the story is going?
I never really know where it's going to end. I tend to know what the midpoint is. In this one, I knew from the start that a bomb was going to go off and that Josh was going to be responsible for it one way or another, but I didn't know where it was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be the place he intended it to happen. I didn't know if it would kill him or not. And I actually went through a version which was quite different.
Right.
But I showed it to a friend and she was like, "Oh no, that's terrible. It's terrible. That's just too sad." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll go for the slightly less sad option then." So I like to keep things open at the end and just to feel my way through the book. And sometimes if I care for a character, I just kind of let them go, So I think that's just it. As I get older and maybe slightly wiser in the whole storytelling business, I plan less, I think, and just try to feel my way through.
So does that mean your characters surprise you?
Yes, definitely. Some of the stuff that they come out with and the choices they make, because sometimes you dig deep into your own experience to try to fill in some of the gaps. So so there's personal encounters that Josh has. There's one that he has with his sister. Where he's trying to get her some money because he knows that he's got to get rid of his money before he dies, because he plans to die only in 20 days, or is it 19 or 18 days, the clock's ticking, and but he's got to see her and give her the money in such a way that she doesn't understand that he's going to kill himself. So he's going to make up all these little stories about
these lies that
all these
lies.
I know, and it becomes dreadful. And then there's this sort of intimacy there of knowing that he'll never see her again, and knowing that their relationship was never perfect to start with, and all the time the wee kids are just running around, and he's thinking about his own daughter and his own childhood and stuff. And writing that, oh my god, that thing was about 40 pages long at one point. And it was just tear jerking to write, and I had to bring it down in size and focus it, but it was that thing of just going with the intuition of knowing that it was really heartfelt and painful, and it would be bloody painful to write and to edit, but I just had to do it without really actually knowing, where it would go. Of course, he's going to walk out of this chapter, but there is a point there in the story where a look from his sister could stop the whole story. Yeah.
But I was thinking as well, a lot of, because there is humour in the novel, and it's almost through, he is quite, what's the word I'm thinking of, not haphazard, but he it's not quite Larry David, but there is something, he gets it a little, he gets things a little wrong, or things go awry, and it's not really his fault. Like, I think he's testing out somewhere, and then someone he knows is walking their dog.
That's
and he's like, how can we, get rid of her, and how much did she see? And there's just, again, this paranoia that, hapless is the word I'm looking for. Hapless. He's kind of hapless as he tries to become this kind of angel of doom or
angel of mercy, angel of vengeance. Well, I mean, I just thought, well, what would I do in these situations? I would be hapless too, rather than sitting at my desk all day. If I was to try to make a bomb and to test it, where do I test it? How do I test it? How do I not get caught as well? So he makes pretty much every mistake that you can make, I think, and there are degrees of slapstick in it as well. Here's a funny question for you though, because I don't know that I ever set out to be funny, but there is humour.
It's dark. I mean, I've written down it is dark humour, but there definitely is humour there. But it is through. I mean, the scene in the hardware store is the perfect example, because what he actually comes across is a young guy who's really keen to do his job well, and he knows the answer to all these things. So when he says, well, what do you want the pipe for? Because this will do that and this will do that. He's like, I just want a pipe that'll,
blow up. but he can't say it. Yeah. So he ends up buying three times as many pipes,
That's
all
right.
different size, being sold 2 extra bags to carry them all, and another £200 worth of stuff, just so as not to.
So I could imagine myself going
suspicion.
to B&Q and doing exactly that kind of thing,
yeah.
and coming back with all sorts of nuts and bolts that I didn't really need.
That's right. And in fact, one of the pieces he's missing as well is actually called a metal nipple. The guy takes the mickey out of him for not knowing what it is. Yeah, no, there's some humour, definitely. Maybe that's just a thing that a writer can't actually plan for.
I mean, just to be clear to listeners, there's not jokes.
No.
It's not that.
No.
But it is just through the reaction of this man who is basically researching, who he thinks, and maybe is on the advice of his dead daughter, to go and find out how to be her act of vengeance, to be, pointed in the right direction. And he's never thought about that before. Who would have thought of it before? So he's got to learn from scratch. And from doing that, the practicalities of that, are sometimes,
Do you know what I think in terms of humour? I think sometimes the humour is just it's a wee bit of a get out from the dark situations that I start writing, and it reminds me a wee bit of the way that the Coen brothers do humour as well. So it's like just unbearably dark, and then there's just a little banal thing, a tiny wee detail. There's one part in the book where he might have just blown himself up had it not been for the neighbour's cat coming in and brushing up against him.
And all of that actually adds to your empathy for Josh. And you were saying, you know, you got to not just like him, but really come to care for him.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be that kind of humanity and as well. Because if it was just someone who, you know, found out how to do it and did it, then it would just be terrifying, really.
Yeah.
This is a man who is us in a way.
Yeah.
You know, he's every day with all the doubts and thoughts and fears and that we all kind of have.
Well, I mean, he's going up against, you know, all of Silicon Valley. He doesn't know it yet, but he's also going up against the government. You know, he's going up against big tech, biotech. He's going up against the police. He really is a little nobody. He's so out of his depth, but he's also going up against the fact that he's never really known what life was all about or what it was for, and he's going up against his own sense of failure. So
he's kind of doing it because he feels he's failed. That's right.
That's right. He feels he's failed his daughter and he's failed in life. So finally he'll have something that will be, you know, a retribution, not just for his daughter, but against the world that made him feel like he was such a pathetic nobody as well. And I think that taps quite deep into my own paranoias anyway about, you know, purpose. What if I have screwed up this only life that I've got, you know?
And as the novel, you know, reaches a conclusion and the editor's role quickens, if you like, the sense of paranoia almost grows, you know. And if you're reading this thinking, well, do people know I'm reading this? You know, because there are statements, there are interviews, there are, you know, lots of different aspects to it as well. Was that when did you decide that was going to happen, that she was going to be under threat in that way?
Things just seemed to escalate, you know. I knew that
escalate's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I knew that I wanted the last bit of the book to be oddly disconnected from the rest of the book, to be just like fragments of evidence that were pulled together in a hurry that tell the consequences of what actually happened. And I saw something years ago that I really wanted to take advantage of, which is a police interview with someone where all the questions were redacted, so you only saw the answers. So you didn't see, so the policeman wasn't culpable for in any way, you know, giving leading questions or anything. You just couldn't see it, and that haunted me. I wanted to use that. So, in the aftermath section of the book, there's an interview with Josh's therapist. It's so hard to talk about it without giving much away, but you know, the cop who interviews him is redacted, and so that process of you know, redacted, blacked out text that we've seen throughout the book that the editor has done, it starts to escalate towards the end, where you get entire sections redacted. There's a letter in there from the FBI that's entirely redacted, apart from like 2 words or something. So yeah, the paranoia escalates as the scale of what this little man has got himself involved in becomes apparent. And maybe even the way that he's been used, and the way it may get out to the wider world as well. Yeah, no, that's our paranoia. I would advise reading it in paper form and not on a computer. Yeah,
or if you do, cover up the camera just in case. You don't know. And reviews are starting to come in for it. Do you take note of reviews, you know, or responses, or are you kind of already moving on to next? I'm always trying to think about. See, I really want this one to be a film, because I can really see it as a film. So my head is quite in that at the moment. There's reviews from people who I, you know, respect, and also from long-term readers as well. Folk I've known for a few years, and it's just amazing to hear. I mean, I think what we generally get is, God, this is the most upsetting thing you've ever written. and that's a general thing. It has me a wee bit worried, actually, because I have to do public readings. Yeah. And I'll start bubbling, you know. There are sections in that book that if I come near them, I'll end up crying on stage somewhere, and I don't want to do that. So I mean, I think that's the general reaction that I get from folk who've read it is, you know, once maybe they let their own guard down, they go, that was very upsetting and very, you know, it's intense. It's an intense book. Yeah, absolutely. And in a way that, you know, you mentioned it's kind of sci-fi, but a way that most sci-fi I think isn't. And I think again it goes back to this really personal situation of Josh and his grief.
Yeah,
that's this, for me, the central part of it. So you can, you know, everyone is going to have some kind of empathy, I think, with that.
I do hope so.
Yeah. And what is next for you? Can you say, or is it just
no, I've actually, so what I did was I took a couple of years out to just write. So the next book's ready to go after this one. It's an even more sci-fi dystopian thing. So in fact, I might even publish it under a slightly different name because it's more. It's probably my first truly genre sci-fi book.
Do an Ian M. Banks, that kind.
I'll have to do an Ian M. Banks with it. I might yet do that. It's called The Children, and it's about a dystopian society where there are very few children, so they've been given immense power over people. And there's an all-powerful AI that helps them, which is called Mama. Yeah. So we shall see. But I think there's going to be a time of readjustment required once this book comes out, because it's been a big chunk of my life and a big emotional investment as well.
I can imagine.
Aye.
Ewan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's great to see you again, and you know, for Emma, as you know, I think it's a brilliant book, so thanks again.
Alistair, brilliant chat as always, man. Good to see you.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.